Do you recall the African-American Thanksgiving dishes nobody makes anymore? They once filled the house with the comforting aroma of slow-cooked love and the warmth of family gathered together. When did we stop preparing the meals that carried our history and traditions with every bite? Smothered turkey necks were born out of necessity, but what people remembered most was the deep flavor they carried. When whole turkeys were too costly, families turned to turkey necks, rich in bone and sinew, their flavors unlocked only by long, slow cooking. First, they were browned to bring out their natural richness, then smothered in a savory onion gravy until the meat became tender, practically falling apart at the touch of a fork. The gravy, thickening over time, transformed into a glossy, deep brown sauce, absorbing the essence of everything that had simmered in the pot. It wasn't just a meal. It was a testament to patience, resourcefulness, and love. Every bite was a reminder that flavor doesn't come from abundance, but from making the most of what you have. Served over rice or mashed potatoes, this dish filled the plate with warmth and soul, and as the smell of onions and slow-cooked turkey necks filled the house, it made you hum in contentment. Smothered turkey necks were more than just sustenance. They were a quiet act of dignity, a reminder that beauty could be created from what others overlooked. Cornbread dressing with gizzards wasn't a dish you followed from a recipe. It was a dish made from memory, instinct, and a cook's steady rhythm. The cornbread came first, baked golden and crumbled finely. The gizzards were simmered until tender, chopped small, and mixed with sautéed onions, celery, broth, and sage. This wasn't delicate food. It was hearty, bold, and meant to feed a crowd. Every aunt, mother, and grandmother had their own version, passed down from one generation to the next. They all tasted like home, like warmth, like the spirit of Thanksgiving in black kitchens. The dressing was often the centerpiece of the meal, the main event, while the turkey itself took a back seat. It was cooked in cast iron pans until the edges became crisp, the center moist, and the aroma of sage and stock filled the house long before the dinner bell rang. Even today, when store-bought mixes have replaced the time-consuming labor of making dressing from scratch, the memories of this dish still linger. It was never just food, it was an act of love, a labor of care that filled the home with a sense of belonging. Collard greens with salt pork were the heartbeat of the season. The sound of the greens simmering in a pot of smoky broth, the hiss of steam escaping as the lid lifted, it was the soundtrack of family gatherings. These greens weren't just a side dish. They were a symbol of resilience and survival. They spoke to the ability to turn what little you had into something rich and satisfying, of making plenty from a meager harvest. The salt pork gave the greens a depth of flavor that could only come from slow cooking and time. Every leaf softened, melting into the broth, absorbing the stories and history from the pot. For many families, collard greens were sacred. They were washed, trimmed, and prayed over before being cooked. The pot liquor that remained at the bottom of the pot was so rich and flavorful, it was saved and soaked up with cornbread, a tradition that persisted long after the meal was over. On Thanksgiving, that pot of collard greens stayed on the back burner, constantly refilled and shared, a quiet reminder that strength, generosity, and love could grow from the hardest of time. Ham hocks and butter beans were the kind of meal that filled the entire house with the smell of home. The smoked hocks simmered low and slow until the marrow melted into the broth, infusing it with flavor and warmth. The butter beans absorbed all that smoky richness, turning soft and creamy as they cooked. This dish wasn't rushed. It required hours of slow cooking, a steady hand, and a kind of attention that you didn't see much anymore. But when that pot was ready, it felt like comfort itself. Thick, salty, and deep with flavor, it was the kind of food that made you feel nourished in every way. For families who couldn't afford extravagant meals, ham hocks and butter beans were a reminder that abundance didn't have to come from a large spread. It came from using what you had with love and making something extraordinary out of the simplest ingredients. Families gathered around that pot, tasting and adding a little more salt or pepper as needed, savoring the warmth of the meal long before it even made it to the dinner table. Ham hocks and butter beans weren't just about food. They were about endurance, resilience, and the kind of love that comes from years of making the most out of what life gives you. Sweet potato souffle with marshmallow topping was the star of mid-century holiday tables, where the warmth of Southern comfort met the dreams of post-war aspirations. The base was velvety and spiced, whipped until smooth with sugar, milk, and eggs, creating a creamy foundation that spoke of both simplicity and care. And then came the marshmallows, soft white puffs that transformed into a golden crown as they toasted in the heat of the oven. This dish was a symbol of celebration, proof that even during tough times, sweetness could find its way to the table. Every forkful was a taste of warmth, nostalgia, and a perfect blend of the old and the new. Black families adopted this dish as a declaration of joy, a dessert cleverly disguised as a side, but rich enough to feel like a luxury even in the most modest of homes. The sweet potatoes brought a grounding earthiness, while the marshmallows added a playful contrast, together creating something that looked as light as air. The first bite always came with a pause, a moment of silent recognition as memories of holidays past filled the heart. Known as homes where food held more meaning than just flavor, this soufflé was a beautiful reminder that comfort, too, could be elegant. Molasses glazed ham steak was a dish that filled the house with a warm perfume, sweet, smoky, and rich with the depth of caramel. Before full hams became an everyday luxury, families made do with thick slices, pan-fried in a skillet, then basted with a mixture of brown sugar and molasses, turning them into something that gleamed on the plate. The glaze clung to the meat like velvet, with the edges crisping just enough to give each bite a satisfying crunch. Served alongside greens or sweet potatoes, it looked like indulgence, but it came from thrift. The molasses brought a depth of flavor no sugar could match, echoing the sweetness of cane fields and the resilience of those who labored in them. The ham steak was a symbol of progress, a small taste of prosperity earned through hard work. When it reached the table, it shone like a grand feast. Its sweetness melted into the gravy, leaving behind a memory of hard-earned satisfaction. Though humble in its origins, it felt like victory. Stewed cabbage with bacon fat was the unmistakable scent of southern kitchens through the ages. The cabbage simmered low and slow until it became soft and tender, with the bacon fat turning it into something glossy and golden. Bacon fat was never considered waste. It was wisdom, a gift that added richness and depth to the simplest of vegetables. With a spoonful of this fat, a humble pot of cabbage could transform into something soul-satisfying, turning what was once discarded into nourishment. At Thanksgiving, stewed cabbage was the dish that brought balance, a grounding note among the heavier sides and meats. It reminded families of simpler meals and humbler times when the value was in the care and creativity behind the food, not in its cost. The taste of the cabbage was smoky and tender, brightened just enough by a touch of vinegar. It was food that spoke quietly of thrift, gratitude, and the joy of making do with what you had. Each serving was a small but sustaining comfort, carrying the legacy of generations who knew that nothing, whether it was a humble vegetable or a scrap of fat, should ever go to waste. Oyster dressing with a cornbread base was where the flavors of the ocean met the essence of the South. Originating from coastal kitchens where oysters were abundant, this dish transformed the sea's bounty into something hearty and filling. The oysters were finely chopped and blended with crumbled cornbread, then seasoned with onions, celery, butter, and a rich broth. As it baked, the house was filled with a savory, aromatic blend of salt, smoke, and sage, evoking warmth with every breath. For families who had left the South to build new lives up north, this dressing was more than a meal. It was a taste of home, an edible bridge to the past. It was luxurious in its simplicity, both decadent and humble. The cornbread provided a comforting, soulful base, while the oysters added a touch of elegance. Together, they created a dish that was rare, capturing both tradition and progress. On Thanksgiving tables, oyster dressing wasn't just a side. It was a testament to travel, adaptation, and pride. Candied yams with orange peel brought a burst of sunshine to the Thanksgiving spread. The sweet potatoes were sliced thick, then soaked in a syrup made from butter, sugar, and fresh orange zest, creating a luxurious glaze that shimmered under the light. The room filled with the irresistible aroma of citrus and caramel, warmth and brightness. This dish transformed humble root vegetables into something worth celebrating, with every bite melting in the mouth like butter and tinged with a hint of orange tang that lifted the sweetness to new heights. For many families, candied yams were the true star of the holiday feast. Sweet enough to be considered dessert, yet soulful enough to stand proudly beside savory dishes. The addition of orange peel was more than just for show. It was a symbol of creativity, a reminder to add a little sparkle to life even when times were tough. The syrup glistened, reflecting the hope that no matter how hard the year had been, the next could always hold joy. The yams were a sweet promise for the future, with a touch of warmth to remind everyone that even the simplest ingredients could carry love. Hoppin' John was the quiet hope that carried families through the holiday. Long before it became synonymous with New Year's Day, it graced Thanksgiving tables in Southern Black households, carrying with it a wish for good fortune and prosperity. Rice and black-eyed peas simmered together, infused with onions, herbs, and a bit of smoked meat. Simple ingredients transformed into a dish that could warm both the body and the spirit. The aroma was deep, earthy, and comforting, a slow-cooked reminder of endurance. Each bowl of Hoppin' John was more than just food. It was a ritual, a blessing with every spoonful, a reflection of people who turned mere survival into something to celebrate. At Thanksgiving, Hoppin' John was a dish eaten with reverence, each bite a small prayer for what was to come. It served as a reminder that gratitude and hope walk hand in hand, one looking back at the blessings of the past, the other forward to what lies ahead. No dish captured this spirit more than Hoppin' John, humble yet filled with purpose, grounding each plate in a quiet but powerful tradition. Fried corn with bacon drippings was a dish that could transform the entire kitchen with its smell, rich and intoxicating. The corn was carefully scraped off the cob, ensuring that every kernel was full of sweetness. Then, in a cast-iron skillet, bacon drippings sizzled, releasing a smoky aroma that seemed to draw everyone into the room. The corn hit the hot pan, crackling as it softened, absorbing all the richness from the fat. A pinch of sugar, a touch of salt, and perhaps a dash of black pepper was all it needed. The result was a creamy dish with no cream, just the perfect balance of sweet and savory. It was the kind of dish that belonged beside every roast and ham, offering comfort and warmth in each bite. For generations of black families, fried corn with bacon drippings was a way to bring the essence of summer into the colder months. It was a reminder that even the simplest ingredients, corn, fat, and thyme, could be turned into something extraordinary. The skillet would be passed around the table until every last kernel was scraped clean, a silent testament to the love and care that went into every meal. It proved that food doesn't have to be fancy to be unforgettable. Turkey wing gravy over rice was a meal that celebrated the art of making the most of what you had. When a whole turkey was out of reach, cooks would turn to the wings, rich with meat and flavor, perfect for slow braising. The wings were browned until golden and then simmered in a fragrant mix of onions, broth, and spices, creating a thick, peppery gravy that coated every grain of rice. The aroma would fill the house with comfort long before the meal was even close to being ready. This dish wasn't just a replacement for something more expensive. It was a testament to the resourcefulness of those who knew how to transform humble ingredients into something extraordinary. As the gravy was poured over the rice, it turned every plate into a story of love, patience, and care. It was the kind of food that told the truth about the holidays, that abundance is not measured by the price of the ingredients, but by the heart that goes into the cooking. Okra and tomato stew was a dish steeped in tradition, its roots extending far beyond the kitchen. Born in the coastal South, it was a perfect marriage of African culinary techniques and American ingredients. The earthy flavor of okra, with its natural thickening power, formed the heart of the stew, while ripe tomatoes brought a burst of color and brightness. Onions, peppers, and garlic added depth, filling the house with the scent of something homemade and comforting. Often served with rice or cornbread, this stew was a blend of spice, sweetness, and a deep, rich history. Families knew that okra and tomato stew was more than just a meal. It was a connection to the past, a bridge between the survival skills of ancestors and the creativity of modern cooks. On Thanksgiving, it reminded everyone that the same resilience and resourcefulness that helped sustain generations past still nourished the present. Each spoonful was a story of endurance, pride, and survival, passed down through the generations with love. Sweet potato biscuits were soft and golden, like a memory you could taste. Made by folding mashed sweet potatoes into flour, butter, and just a touch of sugar, these biscuits were more about feel than measurements. As they baked, the kitchen filled with the kind of comforting smell that made everything else fade away. The biscuits rose gently, tender and flaky, with a subtle sweetness that spoke of both simplicity and care. They were served warm, often split open with butter melting into their soft, orange-hued crumb. For families with limited ingredients, these biscuits were a way to stretch their resources while adding warmth and heart to the meal. They became a symbol of creativity, of making something extraordinary from what little you had. Passed around the table, they were often gone before the second round of servings, leaving only the memory of their comforting taste and the smiles of those who ate them. These biscuits were a quiet reminder that even in the most modest kitchens, great things could be created with a little love and a lot of heart. Chitterling pie was a dish that held generations of history in every bite. The preparation was time-consuming, requiring hours of cleaning, boiling, and seasoning before it ever reached the crust. But for those who made it, chitterlings were not just a dish. They were a symbol of survival, a reminder of the struggles and triumphs that came before. The pie, savory and rich, was baked with onions, peppers, and spices, filling the air with warmth and promise. Though it took patience and labor, chitterling pie was always prepared with pride, especially for holidays like Thanksgiving, when food became a reflection of endurance, gratitude, and the love passed through generations. The pie embodied transformation, turning something humble into something worthy of celebration. It was an act of love expressed through hard work, connecting the present to the past. To eat it was to honor the hands that came before, a reminder that Thanksgiving wasn't just about surviving, it was about triumphing with grace and flavor. Corn pudding casserole was the humble yet essential star of the Thanksgiving spread. Soft, golden, and full of warmth, it brought a comforting richness to the table. Made from fresh corn, milk, eggs, and butter, it baked into a smooth, custard-like dish that shimmered with a golden hue. Its sweetness was light, never too overwhelming, complementing the savory dishes with ease. Though it never demanded attention, it always had its place at the table, year after year. The first spoonful was always the most memorable, melting effortlessly on the tongue, the familiar taste of corn evoking memories of harvests long past and the comfort of home. For families with Southern roots, corn pudding casserole was more than just a side. It was a piece of tradition, steeped in the spirit of the season. The sound of spoons scraping the bottom of the dish, the quiet chatter between bites, and the shared satisfaction all spoke to the love woven into this dish. Corn pudding didn't need to be flashy or fancy. Its purpose was simple, to comfort, and it did so perfectly every time. Mustard greens with smoked turkey brought a bold, soulful note to the holiday table, offering a sharp contrast to the richness of the other dishes. Though the mustard greens were tougher than collard greens, they held their own with a flavor that deepened the longer they simmered. The smoked turkey added a richness to the dish, infusing the pot with smoky depth that soaked into the greens, creating a broth so savory it was sipped up with cornbread. The greens had a tangy, slightly bitter flavor, alive with the heat of spices. Cooking these greens was an act of patience and faith. You started with a mound of leaves that would eventually shrink down to a tender, flavorful dish. This was food that took time, but the reward was always worth it. It was a dish that reminded everyone that the best things in life require time and care. As the bitter greens transformed into something beautiful, it was a reminder of how hardship could give way to nourishment. At Thanksgiving, mustard greens were more than just food. They were a testament to endurance, a reminder that perseverance always finds its reward. Pecan praline cake was the embodiment of generosity and sweetness in every bite. Rich with brown sugar, butter, and toasted pecans, this cake filled the air with an irresistible aroma that could stop anyone in their track. The cake itself was moist and soft, with layers of chopped pecans that toasted as it baked. A glossy praline glaze poured over the top sealed the cake with sweetness, dripping down the sides like golden syrup. This cake was made to be shared, whether at family reunions, church suppers, or holiday feasts. Each bite felt like a hug, warm and welcoming, the kind of dessert that said, "I care." In African American homes, baking was an act of love, a way to express gratitude and community. The pecan praline cake was not just a dessert, it was a symbol of togetherness, an offering of both comfort and celebration wrapped in sweetness. Field peas and rice with fatback were the essence of the rural South. The peas cooked slowly, the earthy flavors of the field simmering in the pot, while strips of fatback released their smoky richness into the dish. It was a simple yet satisfying meal, balanced and hearty, filling but never overwhelming. For many families in rural communities, it was the taste of the harvest, a dish that connected the land to the table. The fatback, with its salty depth, transformed the mild peas into something much more, something sacred. This dish was a testament to the wisdom passed down from one generation to the next. It carried the spirit of the land, the labor, and the love of those who had worked the field. At Thanksgiving, field peas and rice with fatback were a reminder of gratitude, not for what could be bought, but for what was grown. It was nourishment, memory, and faith, all served from the same pot. A dish that connected the past with the present, a reminder that the strength of a meal lies not in its price, but in the care and history it carries. Stuffed bell peppers with rice and ground beef were the perfect example of how love and care could transform even the simplest of ingredients into a meal worthy of celebration. The peppers were carefully hollowed out and filled with seasoned rice, bits of savory ground beef, and a splash of tomato sauce. Then they were baked to perfection until tender, the juices blending together to create a rich, comforting aroma that seemed to pull everyone into the kitchen. This dish often made an appearance when families needed to stretch what they had. With just a pound of beef combined with rice and vegetables, a whole family could be fed. Despite its frugality, the dish still felt like luxury, hearty, filling, and deeply satisfying with every bite. On Thanksgiving, stuffed bell peppers added a touch of color to the table. Vibrant reds, greens, and yellows, a little brightness to accompany the heavier dishes. It was a gentle reminder that beauty could be made from resourcefulness, and the heart of every meal lies in the care taken to prepare it. Turkey and dumplings were the kind of meal that arrived after the excitement had calmed, when the main feast was over and the table was cleared. This dish rose from the remnants of the turkey, scraps, bones, and all. The broth simmered slowly, building layers of deep, comforting flavor, filling the house with the familiar scent of garlic, onions, and love. Soft dumplings, hand-rolled with care, swelled and absorbed the rich flavors of the stew. Each bite felt like comfort itself, warm, nourishing, and deeply satisfying after a long day. For generations, this was the way families honored what they had, turning leftovers into something that felt like a fresh, new meal. The gravy thickened just enough to cling to the spoon, rich yet never overwhelming. Turkey and dumplings weren't just about saving food, they were about gratitude in its purest form. It was an act of making something beautiful from what remained, a meal that silenced the room, with only the sound of spoons scraping bowls clean. Blackberry cobbler with a lard crust was the taste of early winter sweetness, a reminder of simpler time. Before butter was a staple in every kitchen, lard was used to create flaky, tender crusts that shattered under the fork. The wild blackberries, often gathered from fences or creeks, were mixed with sugar and a splash of lemon before being poured into a baking dish. The scent of summer fruits met the coolness of November air, filling the house with warmth. The lard crust puffed and browned in the oven, its layers glistening with melted sugar, while the filling bubbled through in deep purple streaks, staining the edges with sweetness. Served warm, it was a perfect balance of tart and sweet, with a rich, comforting flavor that spoke to both humility and craftsmanship. In Black communities across the South, this cobbler represented care and patience, the time it took to gather berries, render fat, and bake something that would bring everyone to the table. Long before frozen or pre-made pies, this was the real thing, handmade, heartfelt, and unforgettable. Fried catfish nuggets were once the heart and soul of riverside kitchens, a meal that spoke of tradition and pride. Before the days of store-bought turkeys and modern conveniences, many families celebrated by catching their own food from the river. The catfish were cleaned, cut into bite-sized pieces, and rolled in seasoned cornmeal before being fried to a perfect golden crisp. The crackling sound of the fish in the skillet was like music filling the air, an invitation to gather around the table. Catfish was never just a meal, it was an experience. It brought the land and water together, a shared tradition of family, cooking, and giving thanks for what nature provided. The texture was everything, crispy on the outside, tender and flaky on the inside. Every bite carried the memory of family hands at work. Though it may be rare to see fried catfish nuggets on holiday tables today, they once held a place of honor, just like a roasted bird. This dish wasn't just about the fish, it was about the catching, the cooking, and the togetherness it brought. The smell of fried fish and cornmeal would linger long after the meal was done, while laughter echoed through the evening. This dish wasn't just food, it was a ritual, a bond with place, and an honoring of nature and effort. To fry catfish for Thanksgiving was to give thanks for the world outside the door, and to share in the joy of a meal made from love and care. Macaroni pie was the soulful predecessor to what many now call baked macaroni and cheese. It was richer, creamier, and made with care, not shortcuts. The noodles were boiled, drained, and then lovingly folded into a mixture of eggs, evaporated milk, and sharp cheddar, creating a custard-like consistency that baked to perfection. The top developed a golden, crackling crust that invited the first forkful. In Black households, this was always the first dish to disappear, a true symbol of prosperity and pride. Each aunt had her own version passed down through the years. Some added a sprinkle of paprika for warmth, others a dash of mustard or nutmeg for a hint of spice. The texture was unlike any store-bought or instant version, dense yet creamy, solid yet rich, with a flavor that lingered. On Thanksgiving Day, macaroni pie proudly sat alongside the meats and greens, filling the room with the kind of aroma that made you feel at home, no matter where you were. This dish wasn't just a side, it was a tradition passed from generation to generation, with each cook adding their own personal touch. The way the ingredients were stirred, the way it was seasoned, all mattered deeply. It was a dish that demanded time and patience, never rushed. The slow rhythm of stirring, tasting, and adjusting until it felt just right. This was not food to be hurried. It was food meant to be savored, to be remembered. Like family, the pie held together, warm, comforting, and full of love. Giblet pie was a masterpiece born from thrift and flavor. Made from turkey hearts, gizzards, and livers, parts others might discard, it transformed these humble ingredients into something unforgettable. The giblets were simmered with onions, celery, and sage until tender, then simmered into a rich, peppery gravy. This mixture was poured into a pie crust and baked until it bubbled up, its golden top shimmering in the oven's warmth. The aroma alone was enough to stop conversation, drawing everyone to the table with its savory scent. Warm, comforting, and full of umami, giblet pie embodied the principle of waste, not, want not. Every bite carried with it a deep sense of history and tradition. It was a quiet reminder that nothing should ever be wasted, that every part of the bird had value. Served hot, it was home in a crust. Humble but generous, this pie was the essence of old-fashioned cooking, where every scrap of meat was cherished and made into something beautiful. Giblet pie was more than just a meal. It was a symbol of survival and ingenuity. Generations learned to turn what others saw as leftovers into celebrations of flavor. The thick, fragrant gravy felt like a warm embrace, straight from the heart of the kitchen. It tasted like time spent learning, time spent together, time spent making the most of what little was available. It was a dish that reflected the perseverance of those who came before, a meal that honored the labor and love that went into every bite. In those homes, nothing was just leftovers. It was the foundation of the meal, a story of gratitude and resilience, written in flour, love, and the hands that had learned to create something from nothing. Caramel cake was the crowning jewel of the dessert table, a true labor of love that required both skill and patience. The cake itself was soft, golden, and perfectly baked, but the true magic lay in the frosting. A caramel sauce made from sugar that was cooked just to the edge of burning, then cooled and beaten until it achieved that perfect glossy sheen. It was a delicate process that demanded time, attention, and a steady hand. One mistake could ruin the whole batch, but when done right, the result was nothing short of perfection. Smooth, rich, and sweet, with a lingering flavor that stayed long after the last bite. Families gathered around the kitchen to watch as the frosting was poured, knowing that this moment marked the peak of their celebration. It was a dessert reserved for holidays, family gatherings, and special Sundays, a time when love was measured by effort. The first slice revealed layers of golden promise, and by the time the last crumb was eaten, there was always someone wishing for just one more piece. The taste was unlike anything store-bought, deeply buttery, with a hint of bitterness that made it unforgettable. Making caramel cake required a certain kind of courage, a confidence built over years of perfecting the craft. For the women who mastered it, this cake was both a mark of pride and a heartfelt offering. It said, "I made this with everything I know." Each bite was a reminder of time spent in the kitchen, where sweetness wasn't rushed, but earned through patience and care. Buttermilk pie, on the other hand, was a humble dessert with a quiet grace. Made from simple ingredients, eggs, sugar, butter, and tangy buttermilk, it baked into a custard-like texture with a thin, caramelized top. The scent that filled the house was soft, a gentle whisper of vanilla and cream that never overpowered but always lingered. The sweetness of the pie was modest, balanced perfectly by the tartness of the buttermilk, making it the ideal dessert after a rich meal. This pie was a reminder of simpler times when desserts came from what was already in the pantry. The first spoonful felt like silk, smooth, cool, and comforting. In Black and Southern homes alike, buttermilk pie spoke the shared language of frugality and flavor, proving that with just a handful of ingredients and a little patience, something truly transcendent could be made. The beauty of it was in its simplicity. It was plain in appearance, pale in color, but once tasted, it burst with richness. It wasn't about how it looked, it was about how it made you feel, comforted, at peace. It reminded everyone that luxury wasn't about cost, but about the love put into every dish. The pie cooled slowly on windowsills, its fragrance drifting outside, where it would mix with the sounds of family and prayer. Every slice told a story of hands that measured by instinct, of grandmothers who made do with what they had, creating magic from the simplest of ingredients. Buttermilk pie was tradition wrapped in simplicity, a quiet miracle served on a humble paper plate. Rice dressing with chicken livers was a dish that carried the soul of the coast and the rhythm of the Creole kitchen. The rice was cooked in a rich, flavorful broth, mingling with minced chicken livers, onions, and herbs until every grain was glistening. The scent alone was earthy and inviting, making your mouth water long before it was ready to serve. Each family had their own version of this dish. Some added sausage, others preferred bell peppers and celery. But the core intention was the same, to make something abundant from whatever was available. On Thanksgiving tables, rice dressing was much more than just a side dish. It was comfort, it was history, and it was connection. It tied the Louisiana Delta to the Carolinas and beyond, bringing people together with its bold, complex flavors. The dish spoke of the sacred and the everyday, of simple ingredients coming together to create something extraordinary. Each bite was a reminder of generations past, cooking not by recipes, but by instinct. Rice dressing was a reflection of community, a Creole tradition where food was meant to be shared, savored, and celebrated. Each spoonful felt like a gathering of voices, of family, of migration, and of love. The rice soaked up the soul of the pot, absorbing the flavors until they all melded into one voice. This was food that required presence, care, and patience. To make rice dressing was to honor the art of transforming labor into flavor, of turning love into nourishment. Sweet potato bread pudding was the perfect dessert, born from resourcefulness and love. It started as a way to use what was left over: stale bread, extra sweet potatoes, a bit of milk, and sugar. The bread would soak up the custard, turning every crumb golden and soft, with the sweet potatoes adding both color and richness. Baked slowly until the edges caramelized and the top turned a warm brown, it emerged from the oven, filling the air with the comforting scent of cinnamon and nutmeg. Served warm, it was silky and decadent, sometimes topped with a drizzle of cream or a spoonful of syrup. Each bite was a reminder of simpler time. For many families, this was more than just dessert. It was a way to show gratitude through ingenuity, a celebration of not letting anything go to waste. It was sweet yet grounded, tender but full of strength, both a dessert of humility and joy. In households where thrift was a way of life, this pudding represented wisdom, turning the humble into the extraordinary. Each bite carried with it the memory of hands that refused to throw food away, that saw value in what others overlooked. The pudding wasn't just a treat, it was an act of love, slow and deliberate. The scent of it baking felt like a promise, a reminder that warmth and comfort could be created even from scarcity. It was simple, yet deeply meaningful, soft enough for children, sweet enough for elders, and rich with history for everyone in between. Black-eyed pea salad was a dish full of tradition, carrying luck into the new year before the clock even struck midnight. Served cold, it was a tangy contrast to the heavier dishes that dominated the holiday spread. The peas were cooked to perfection, tender and rich, then mixed with diced peppers, onions, and a zesty vinegar dressing that danced on the tongue. For many, it was more than a side, it was a ritual, a dish imbued with hope. In African American homes, black-eyed peas symbolized prosperity and renewal, passed down through generations as a way to celebrate the potential of the coming year. Preparing them for Christmas was an act of faith in what lay ahead. The salad, simple to make but full of flavor, often improved with time as it sat overnight, letting the vinegar and sweetness of the onions mingle. It was a perfect balance of tart and sweet, light yet full of meaning. Though simple in its ingredients, black-eyed pea salad was a dish with deep roots, a quiet blessing on every table. At church dinners and family gatherings, you would always find a bowl of it, colorful, glistening, and made with care. It was often the most understated dish on the table, but the one that carried the most significance. A dish that didn't shout, but instead silently carried with it a hope for the future and the strength of those who made it. Black walnut cake was the epitome of patience, persistence, and love, a dessert that carried with it the essence of hard work and time. Families would wait for the autumn winds to drop black walnuts to the ground, their hands stained as they cracked open the tough shells. The scent of these freshly harvested walnuts filled the kitchen, earthy and bold, reminding everyone that this cake came straight from the land. This was no delicate, dainty dessert. It was a cake with character, dense and flavorful, packed with spices that lingered in the air and evoked memories of home. Black walnuts weren't something you bought from a store. They were a gift from the earth, a treasure that had to be earned. Using them in the cake was as much an act of gratitude as it was a tradition. When baked into a Christmas cake, the nutty richness of the walnuts transformed humble ingredients into something truly extraordinary. Served after long church services or during family gatherings that felt like they would never end, the cake became the star of every dessert table. Each slice was a reminder of harvests long past, of hands and hearts that worked hard to nurture what the earth had provided. Today, there are few desserts that taste this honest, that are so deeply connected to the land and to the people who cultivated it. Black walnut cake was more than just a recipe. It was the very flavor of belonging, a taste of family history wrapped in the warmth of home. Record player gifts were a tradition that could make Christmas mornings unforgettable. The wrapping paper was torn slowly at first and then all at once, revealing a brand new turntable gleaming in the light. For many families, it was the most prized gift under the tree. Fathers would carefully set it up while mothers pulled out their best vinyl. Soon, the house was filled with the sounds of Stevie Wonder, Nat King Cole, and Aretha Franklin. As everyone danced barefoot in their pajamas, their joy uncontainable. Music had a way of uniting generations. Elders swayed gently to the rhythm. Children twirled in the living room, and no one wanted the music to stop. That crackle of the needle touching the record signaled the true start of the holiday, the moment when time seemed to stand still. Record players weren't just gifts, they were like time machines, carrying the sound of joy from one generation to the next, bringing the past and present together in every note. Roasted acorns were a last resort food that demanded patience, grit, and a willingness to make do with what the land offered. Families would gather acorns from oak trees, then leach them in water to remove the bitterness. After hours of preparation, they were roasted or ground into meal, becoming a base for porridge, bread, or simple roasted snacks. It was a labor-intensive process, but it provided nourishment when there were few other options. Children often joined in the gathering, their small hands filling baskets to help their families survive another lean season. The flavor of the roasted acorns was earthy and nutty, a reminder of the forests that provided when nothing else was available. For the families who depended on them, acorns weren't a choice. They were a necessity. They were a testament to survival, showing that even the most overlooked resources could be transformed into something sustaining. Though rarely spoken of today, roasted acorns represent a piece of the Jim Crow South, where people learned to survive by using every part of the land. Acorns were more than food. They were a symbol of endurance, proving that with patience and determination, families could make it through the toughest times. They weren't just sustenance, they were a lifeline. Glazed carrots with molasses and brown sugar were once the shining jewel of Christmas side dishes, long before canned vegetables and store-bought glazes became the norm. These carrots, glistening with their molasses glaze, would grace every holiday plate, adding a touch of sweetness and warmth to the feast. The slow simmer of molasses and butter created a deep caramel richness, coating each carrot in a layer of sweetness and shine. The brown sugar melted into the glaze, adding a hint of warmth that transformed a simple vegetable into something both comforting and luxurious. This dish was more than just food. It was a reminder that even the humblest of roots could turn into something that tasted like gold. Children adored it, seeing it as candy in disguise, while adults cherished it for its deep connection to family tradition. These carrots weren't about fancy presentation or showy garnishes. They were about love, slow cooked and poured into every spoonful. For many African American families, molasses was more than just flavor. It was a link to survival, a reminder of days when sugar was scarce, and molasses was the sweetener that kept the family going. This made the glazed carrots more than just a side dish. They were a symbol of gratitude, a celebration on a plate. The scent of molasses bubbling in the pan would fill the home, signaling that something special was in the works, that a holiday feast had begun. Though this dish has faded from many tables, for those who remember, its sweetness lingers in the heart like a melody you can't forget. Caramel layer cake was a dessert that demanded patience, skill, and dedication. The Caramel frosting, made by carefully stirring sugar over low heat, could be ruined in a second if not watched closely. The smell of sugar turning to golden amber was a sensory reminder of how precious this cake was. Each layer of cake was soft and buttery, but it was the frosting that made it unforgettable, sweet, smoky, and just a touch bitter. It wasn't just a cake, it was a statement, a dessert that spoke of love and pride. African American women passed down their caramel cake recipes like treasured secrets, each version slightly different, perfected over decades of family Christmas dinners. The first slice of the cake, cut through the glossy caramel top like glass, revealed soft, moist layers that seemed to melt on the tongue. No mass-produced dessert could ever come close to the depth of flavor or the love baked into this cake. Caramel layer cake was more than just dessert. It was a legacy, proof that skill and care could transform a few simple ingredients into something extraordinary. It was a labor of love, both from the hands that baked it and from the hearts that received it. Each bite was an offering, a celebration of time, effort, and the joy of sharing something beautiful with those you loved. Community potluck dinners, often held in church basements, were where generosity took center stage. Long folding tables overflowed with macaroni, fried chicken, collard greens, sweet pies, and countless other dishes, each one brought in by a neighbor or family member eager to share. The aroma of spices and butter clung to the air, mixing with the laughter and gospel tunes playing from an old speaker in the corner. Elders swapped recipes and memories while passing plates of food, and children darted between legs, sneaking bites before grace was said. No one asked who brought what or how much. It didn't matter. What mattered was that everyone shared, everyone came together. When the meal was done, the leftovers were packed into foil and sent home with anyone who needed them most. The food nourished the body, but the fellowship fed something deeper, the soul. It was community made visible, love served family style, and faith lived out in flavor and care. Those dinners weren't just about the food. They were about the connection between neighbors, the shared joy of gathering, and the unspoken bond that tied everyone in that room together. Pokeberry wine, carefully made from foraged berries, was much more than just a drink. It was a folk remedy, a symbol of survival. The deep purple berries, if mishandled, were toxic, but when boiled and strained, they transformed into a liquid believed to ease pain and treat ailments. In communities with limited access to medical care, such home remedies became essential. The recipes for pokeberry wine were passed down carefully, each step closely guarded to avoid harm while drawing out the plant's healing potential. Housewives would make small batches of it, knowing it wasn't meant for pleasure, but for practicality and survival. Some elders would sip it daily, swearing by its ability to ease arthritis or calm the nerves. The drink was a symbol of ingenuity, proof that even the wildest and most dangerous plants could be transformed into something valuable with knowledge and care. Children were warned never to eat the berries raw, but they grew up learning about the importance of the wine to their family's survival. Though modern science has questioned its effectiveness, pokeberry wine once served as a lifeline created from the land's bounty and passed down through generations, blending tradition, necessity, and the wisdom of survival. It was a quiet reminder that in the toughest times, nature could provide the answers, and with care, what seemed dangerous could turn into something essential. Molasses pound cake was the kind of dessert that lingered in the memory long after the last crumb had been eaten. Dense and rich in flavor, it was spiced with cinnamon, ginger, and cloves, the perfect warmth for cold evenings when the simple act of baking could fill a home with a comforting glow. Molasses took the place of sugar when it was too expensive, imbuing the cake with a deep caramel-like soul and giving it its signature dark color. The batter was thick and fragrant, poured lovingly into well-worn loaf pans, ones that had seen countless family gatherings and holiday celebrations. When it came out of the oven, the crust gleamed with a slightly sticky sheen, reminiscent of honey kissed by smoke. It wasn't just a cake, it was a family tradition passed down through generations, often written in fading ink on the backs of church bulletins or tucked inside well-loved cookbooks. For those who made it, it wasn't merely dessert, it was a way to preserve memories, a symbol of family, and a testament to resilience. The flavor was bold but not overwhelming, sweet yet grounded, embodying the spirit of the people who baked it. Paired with a glass of milk or a drizzle of cream, each bite carried with it a taste of history, a reminder that sweetness could be found even in the most modest of ingredients. Molasses pound cake wasn't about extravagance, it was about memory. It was a way of keeping the essence of sweetness alive, even in leaner times. In that way, it was more than just a cake. It was a slice of resilience, baked golden with love and tradition. Fried cabbage with bacon fat was never about being fancy. It was about being good, and good it was. It started as a way to stretch meals, transforming a humble head of cabbage into something rich, savory, and comforting. The sound of bacon fat sizzling in the skillet was the very start of flavor, setting the stage for the magic that would unfold. As the cabbage hit the pan, the kitchen filled with the deep, smoky aroma of bacon fat, a scent so inviting it had mouths watering before the dish even finished cooking. Seasoned simply with salt, pepper, and sometimes a pinch of onion, this dish became one of the most satisfying sides on the table. During Christmas, it sat proudly next to the bigger, more elaborate dishes, greens, cornbread dressing, and sweet potatoes, holding its own with the kind of straightforward, honest flavor that made every meal feel complete. Cabbage was cheap and easy to come by, but what made it special was the care with which it was cooked, tenderized slowly with attention, love, and of course, a bit of leftover bacon grease from breakfast. Every bite of this dish carried the taste of thrift, wisdom, and a life well lived. It was proof that nothing in a good kitchen should go to waste, and even the simplest ingredients, when treated with care, could nourish both body and soul. This dish was more than just food. It was a reminder that love could be found in the most humble of meals. It was comfort, it was warmth, and it was a dish that always tasted like home. Sorrel Punch Cake was a beautiful union of islands and America, bringing together the vibrant flavors of the Caribbean and the traditions of the American South on one holiday table. The red petals of dried sorrel or hibiscus were steeped into a syrup spiced with ginger, cloves, and other warm seasonings, and then folded into a rich batter that turned the cake a deep, vibrant crimson. For many African American families with Caribbean roots, this dessert was far more than just flavor. It was identity itself. The tang of hibiscus, the warmth of the spices, and the memory of Christmases spent across the seas all came together in one sweet, unforgettable bite. The aroma filled the air, intoxicating and fragrant, a beautiful blend of floral notes and warm spice. Once baked, the cake was brushed with more sorrel syrup, making it glossy and fragrant, a dessert that practically glowed like ruby glass, inviting everyone to indulge. Sorrel Punch Cake was a link to the past, a connection to ancestors who had used the same ingredients in a faraway land to celebrate surviving another year. It carried the essence of culture in every bite, reminding us that while traditions may travel across oceans, they never truly fade away. It was history in sugar and spice, passed down with love and intention. Christmas morning radio shows used to be the heart and soul of early holiday celebrations, long before the world went digital. DJs with warm, familiar voices greeted neighborhoods still waking up, mixing gospel tracks with holiday greetings from local families. Static hummed softly between songs, adding a certain charm to the air. That crackling sound, that rhythm, it felt like home. Mothers would cook breakfast to the tunes of Mahalia Jackson, while fathers adjusted the dial, nodding along to the music. Children would shout, "Merry Christmas," live on air, their voices filled with excitement, cutting through the static. It wasn't just music, it was connection, it was community. The radio carried families together, linking every listener through shared love, laughter, and faith. Radios crackled in kitchen, cars, and living rooms, filling the homes of all who needed them. Collard green sandwiches were a clever and resourceful way to fill plates when meat was scarce or too expensive. Cooked collard greens, often seasoned with fatback or any leftover drippings, were tucked between slices of cornbread, making for a simple yet hearty meal. This humble sandwich was portable, filling, and affordable, and it became a dependable choice for families who were stretched thin by poverty and segregation. Children often carried these sandwiches to school or work in lunch pails, a symbol of ingenuity and resilience. Housewives leaned on collard greens because they were easy to grow, even in poor soil, and cornbread was a staple in every kitchen. Together, these two ingredients formed a powerful combination, nourishing both the body and the spirit. These sandwiches were were not about glamour or status. They were about survival, creating something substantial and sustaining out of the simplest of ingredients. Though rarely remembered today, collard green sandwiches once represented a culture of self-reliance and endurance. They carried families through tough times, turning two of the humblest foods into a strong statement of strength and resilience, surviving hardship with creativity and resourcefulness. Baked macaroni pie was where comfort and celebration met, blending rich tradition with soulful flavor. Unlike its modern boxed counterpart, this dish was made from scratch, crafted with love and care. Tender layers of pasta held together by eggs, milk, and sharp cheddar cheese were baked to perfection, with the top forming a golden, bubbling crust while the inside stayed creamy and soft. It wasn't just a side dish, it was a centerpiece of any holiday table, especially during Thanksgiving and Christmas. Every bite carried the flavor of home, effort, and pride, filling the room with the warm aroma of melted cheese, garlic, and freshly baked goodness. Long before the convenience of processed food, this was what macaroni and cheese meant, a dish born from community cookbooks, perfected over time and cooked with love in cast iron pans. Children would eagerly wait for the first cut, watching steam rise as the dish hit the cool December air. The scent mingled with the smells of baked ham, greens, and sweet yams, creating a symphony of aromas that marked the holiday meal. Macaroni pie wasn't just about sustenance, it was about identity. It told a story of creativity born from scarcity, of taking what you had and making something extraordinary. That first creamy, cheesy forkful spoke louder than words could express. It carried the legacy of family, tradition, and the joy of making the most of what you had. If these dishes brought back memories for you, share them in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep the spirit of these meals alive.